Devin, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for being here. I'm so happy that you're here today. And I just want to start by jumping right in. I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about what you do and what led you to create Generation Mindful.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. I've been an educator and a therapist, a physical therapist for 25 years. And as a parent educator, I teach infant massage and positive parenting. And the community Generation Mindful really was born out of one of those classes about a year and a half ago, maybe it was 2 years ago. One of my graduates said to me, she raised her hand at the end of class, we talk about positive parenting and all the strategies, which involves a lot of mindfulness. And she raised her hand and she said, Suzanne, I'm hearing you in my head. And I said, I am so sorry. I'm so sorry. What's going on? And she said, no, it's not a bad thing. I was going to lose it on my kid last night. I was just going to lose it. And I heard you say, connect before you correct, which is something that we say a lot. It's one of the, I love mantras, and it's something that we said a lot in class. And I was so inspired by her story because she said, Suzanne, I got down low. I made eye contact. I did all the things. But she said it was because I had that moment and I paused, right? And I heard those words in my head and everything changed for me. And that moment inspired me. She also asked me, she said, now how do I do this more? How do I do this when I'm really upset and angry and stressed? And how do I teach my husband? And how do I teach my mother-in-law? She had her whole list of like, okay, this is working, but what am I going to do? And I went home and I said, I don't know, but I'm going to think about this. And immediately the answer started coming. And the first answer that came to me was, it needs to be playful. And it really does all start with our mind energy and our thoughts. So Generation Mindful was born in order to solve that problem. And the problem is, how do we take what we are increasingly learning from science and how do we apply it to our life as parents and educators very playfully and practically? And that is Generation Mindful. We are a social mission-driven company giving back tools that nurture emotional intelligence to schools and nonprofits. And so I'm just thrilled to be here to talk about social emotional regulation and how your parents out there can be tweaking just some very simple things, and they're going to see big results in the way of allowing for emotions in their home and in the class setting, themselves, their emotion, their child's emotion, and then the next step, which is how to regulate those big feelings.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, we're so happy to have you here to talk about this. And I think a good place to start would be, can you just define emotional intelligence? What is that? And maybe also emotional regulation, because I know that these kind of go hand in hand, but we can start with emotional intelligence. What is this actually? Because it's a buzzword. We hear it a lot, but what is it and how does it apply to toddlers?
I love it. Okay, so it's really made up of 4 parts. And I'm going to really bottom line it for you. This is a way you can explain it to children. It's how we see the world and the things we do in the world. Isn't that easy? It's see and do. Now we got it down to 2 words. The things you see in the world, the things you do in the world. Okay, let's tease that out a little bit more. The things we see in the world and the things we do in the world. So there's my social skills, my self-awareness, my awareness of others, and then my self-care, right? Those are the 4 facets of emotional intelligence. 2 of those have to do with the things I see in the world about myself and about you. And 2 of those have to do with the things I do in the world, the way I care for myself and the way I care about you, my social skills. And so these abilities reside in the prefrontal cortex, and they are not abilities that we are wired for when we are born. When we are born as an infant, we are born into the brain stem. That's the only function we have in the brain. It's fight, flight, or freeze for the first 8 weeks of life. And only then, when we are about 8 weeks old, do we start moving into the forming middle brain, the limbic brain. And for your viewers out there, they'll know their little 8-week-olds moving in there. Do you know that moment where you're like, they're looking at me, they are smiling at me? That's that limbic brain going online. You can see it. It's so cool. And I teach baby massage, so I get to see that every Friday. I've got all these little babies, various stages. And then finally, and we're talking about toddlers in this conference, at about age 2.5, 3, your little one is just starting to make these neurosynapse connections to the area of the brain where the social emotional skills reside, and that's the prefrontal cortex. And they've got till age 24 or 26 to really finish that. So I hope that helps kind of give an overview of social emotional skills, what they are, why we care, and then you asked me another question, didn't you, there?
Yeah, about what does that have to do with emotional regulation?
Yes. Okay, so once we have these skills, one of the things we can do is put them all together and do something called social emotional regulation. And that's different. So one is emotional intelligence are the skill sets, and then social emotional regulation is the practice of applying those skill sets. So if I become dysregulated, I will become triggered or set off neurologically. I could become overwhelmed on a sensory level as an adult or a child, or even an infant. You can look at an infant who gets hungry or wet or they're cold. They're triggered by their sensory surroundings, environment, and the information coming into their body is enough to set them off, and they get triggered. And then what do we do as adults? We bounce them, we pat them, we rock them, we feed them. We meet those basic needs, and they regulate. And so the human body is actually designed to co-regulate. And I think there's a big myth out there called self-regulation, particularly when you look to the infant or the toddler. We are not designed to be individuals. The human was born to live in a tribe and to co-regulate, right? To live in community. So it's really freeing for my parents to understand that if your little one is dysregulated, do not be upset, and understand, predict it, expect it. Say, oh yeah, there you are. Of course you're dysregulated. You're too. And we're at grandma's and you've never been here before. And just being in a new environment is enough to throw you off the train tracks. Once you understand what social emotional regulation is made up of, and you can identify when your child is needing some support to regulate, you can get in there and co-regulate with your child. So does that help explain what social emotional regulation, why we need it and kind of what it is? It's basically helping to stay centered ourselves. You'll know when you're centered or when you're not. And then it's helping our child do that same thing.
Absolutely. I mean, this is a wealth of knowledge and an important distinction between the two. And you brought up so many good points. But to start with that, there we have to have a skill set, and then we use the skill set. So it's about building up the skill set and then enacting and using the skill set, which is a multi-step process, which is really great. And thinking about toddlers around 2.5 and 3 is when, as you said, when they're really starting to be able to learn these skills and make the connections in their brain to understand these skills. And so that leads me to think that this is a very critical period when we should be working with emotions with toddlers and teaching them about this awareness.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Oh, you brought up so many good things there. I could talk about a couple things. One of my favorite, I'm going to say something funny here that I use with my clients, just because you said one of these words that's just, I'm sort of like a word police person, right? Because I'm all about our mindset and our belief systems. And I believe our words make a difference. Like it's a resonance thing when I say a word. And so one word that I've just extracted, and there's maybe two, try and should, right? Mm-hmm. So should. So I'm just going to say it. Like one thing I say is, I won't should on you if you don't should on me, right? I think it's funny, but it's true, right? So for your families out there, you're going to be hearing me talk about social emotional skills, and you're going to maybe think, oh, insert 4-letter word, I haven't been doing this, or I need to be doing this, or you might should on yourself and say, I should be doing these things. And I want you to know you have permission to be not perfect. I'm not perfect. I do these things wrong every day. I fall into my own, pitfalls was what I call them. But that doesn't matter. What matters is that I see myself and I go, oh, look at me, completely off center. And then for me, it's that moment of awareness where I catch myself, maybe I'm running a number on myself or my kid, I'm running the guilt thing and I hear myself say, you should clean up your room. And then I go, whoa, wait, hit the pause button. This is a moment for awareness. And then everything shifts from there. And instead of beating myself up, I celebrate myself now. I used to beat myself up. And now I do this little boom dance, I rock. That's sort of the thing that I use with my clients and say, how often are you telling yourself that you rock? So when you catch yourself, even if you catch yourself yelling at your child, right? I even had a client call me in an SOS moment. She said, I just hit my kid. I was so dysregulated. I hit him. I spanked my kid. She's like, I don't do that. And she texted me and she needed to talk. And I texted back, have you celebrated? She said, what the heck? No. And I said, well, have you ever reached out to another person in a moment like this before? She said, no. And I said, well, then you're doing something new. This is transformation. This is what it looks like. You're having a huge moment of awareness right now. Celebrate yourself. Love yourself. You never have to do this again. This is the last time you have to go around this merry-go-round. So for all of you out there, when you have a moment of self-awareness, even if it's around something that you choose never to do again, celebrate yourself because it literally releases dopamine in your brain. And dopamine is this chemical that makes us want to do more of that thing, right? So anyway, that was my little tangent there. You asked about another thing that, the children are 2.5 and they are forming new neural synapses and they're doing it by modeling, right? So I want to make the point for all of y'all out there that one of the ways we learn and grow most powerfully as human beings is through this modeling. So you don't need to be perfect, but as you become more self-aware and you start to use social emotional regulation skills for yourself, don't worry about having to teach them to your child. You're already teaching them. They're already learning. They just are. They're absorbing. And the last point I want to make is I have a lot of clients that say to me, oh no, my 4-year-old is very mature. She knows better. And when she did that thing, she just went ahead and did it. Like she knows better. And what I want you to know about that is with a 4-year-old brain, there's what you just said, there's the skill sets and there's being able to use it. Mm-hmm. And so do not be confused when you know your child has a skill set. Do not think just because they have it, they can use it. It's up to us to nurture the neural synapses that connect the ability to do the skill and the ability to draw on that skill in a moment of trigger. And if you think about your own self, you know lots of things. You know lots of things about exercise and eating right, and you know lots of things about electronics and sleep. Do you do all of them? Heck no. So I hope that gives you a big ounce of compassion for your 4-year-old that you think is this little mini adult, and they are not. And there's a lot of research that says we as adults are holding our bar too high. We expect a child to see a cookie and not eat it, and then tell us the truth if they did eat it. When we nail them, no, you're gonna turn your back. They're gonna go get the cookie. They're gonna eat it, and you're gonna say, "Did you eat it?" And they're gonna go, "No." And they're wired to do this. Do not think they are a sociopath. They are wired. They're just wired to explore their sensory world, go get the yummy cookie, meet the need for this tasty sensory experience, and then they're wired for your approval, for self-preservation. So when you say, "Did you do that?" and they lie, do not think they are lying. I want you to know they're doing the best skill they know, which is self-preservation. So the best thing to do in that circumstance is not to back them in a corner where they're forced to lie, right? It's to help your child feel safe, to know that they can even tell you the hard things. And you can say, if you did, it would be okay. I would want to know, and it would be okay, and we could talk about that. And so when your child understands that misbehavior is an unmet need, that you're holding misbehavior not as you are bad and wrong, but that this is something we can learn and grow from, everything changes, really.
Absolutely. And this is something that I talk with parents about a lot, is that the developmental task of toddlers is to explore. They're constantly exploring, and something that drives that exploration is really understanding their environment and the people in their environment. And they haven't been around very long, and there's so many nuanced situations that they need to explore. What happens if I do this? If I do this and this and that? And it's all of these explorations. And the even larger root of these explorations is to find out, am I still safe? Am I still loved? Is there still a leader and a guide, even if I do these things? Because that's really what they're searching for, is this feeling of safety. And that feeling of safety really can inform everything else. I mean, it's really it's the anchor and the rock that toddlers are looking for, and that looking for us to guide them to and give to them.
Yes, absolutely. Bottom line, Generation Mindful, were three things: helping children and adults feel safe, powerful, and connected. Because that's our birthright, I believe, that we are love. We don't need to prove anything to anybody. We already are. And for our little people to feel safe allows everything to unfold, because it requires safety to move out of your brainstem. When your whole job is self-preservation and you don't feel safe, you're not allowed to go anywhere else. And the brainstem is the reptilian brain, so it's going to be very primitive. The results you're going to see in a child, and I want people to know out there, do not feel guilty or wrong or bad if you feel like, I have a child who I think is 24/7 in the brainstem, or in maybe the limbic brain, the emotive brain. Because I want you to know, research shows children are picking up belief systems in utero. In utero. Our children are having experiences in utero. Like I had twins, right? I had two in there. They might have been kicking and poking each other, and who knows what was going on in there. They were having an inner experience already. They don't have the prefrontal cortex, so they're not having analytical thought, but they have the cellular body. And we remember, the body keeps the score, it remembers. So let's say we have a baby who gets born and goes into the NICU. That child is having an experience. It is nothing to feel bad, wrong, or guilty about. It's simply an experience. And what I love about when we learn about healing and we learn about regulation, we can be, as human beings, with many difficult things. We have the scope and the capacity to integrate trauma. When we do it intentionally, we can make a huge difference with children who have been subjected to some really tough things. And it comes through this skill set of social emotional regulation. And it comes by feeling safe and putting words and expression, even if not words, expression to our feelings. And if you'd like, I can walk you through an acronym I use to remember the 5 steps of social emotional regulation, or emotional intelligence.
Absolutely. I think that would be great. That sounds wonderful.
Okay. So this comes out of the Yale School of Emotional Intelligence, fabulous group, doing tons of research and applying it very practically, mostly to the school setting. And this little acronym is called RULER, okay? And it stands for regulate, so recognize, understand, label, express, and regulate. And we can go through those. It starts with recognizing it, doesn't it? So if I am turning into Scary Mom and I notice I'm turning into Scary Mom, I recognize I'm angry, right? I'm upset. So recognize, understand. I understand I'm upset because I asked for this to be done and it hasn't, and it's all around me, and I'm starting to feel really triggered just by my environment. I like structure and order. Not really. I'm like crazy, but let's say I am of that person who likes to have everything like this, and now I'm feeling triggered, right? So I understand what's going on. So I recognize, understand, label. Just by giving it a name. Dan Siegel calls it name it to tame it. And there were some fabulous scientists before him that were talking about the ability to label something and regulate just by labeling it. I feel frustrated. So recognize, understand, label, express. See what I did there? I labeled it and I expressed it. And just by putting words to it, there's science that shows we're moving into another part of our brain. We're moving up into higher parts, the more like human, more evolved part of the brains when we're able to put expression to our feelings. So, so recognize, understand, label, express, and then regulate. That's what comes next. And we've got actually 11 favorite tools Generation Mindful's created and really fleshed out for children, specific to regulation. There are hundreds, but I believe that it's sometimes less is more. And when you're starting with children, to have just 11 that you can touch and name and practice and do over and over again, they can really bring these skill sets in, starting at, gosh, definitely age 2, but certainly age 3, bringing these skill sets in, and you're gonna be regulating.
That's so exciting. And I think that this is really great to think about. And it's really interesting that when we're looking at this acronym that we are thinking that regulation is actually step 5. So there's a lot of stuff that happens before we can expect regulation, which sometimes can be translated to the behavior we want to see from our child. And there's so many things that come before that. And so it's really interesting to keep that in mind.
Oh my gosh, thank you for drawing that parallel. Yes, right? Like that's such an aha moment. And oh my gosh, and it's so practical because I love to go into classrooms, and I have twins and they're in 2nd grade. I love one of my teachers, and she sent home this beautiful, like, welcome back to school letter. And then she started going into behavior, right? Like behavior. And I was sort of inward giggling, like, no, like we don't start by behavior. Talk about emotion. And so I actually got to go in that classroom. She invited me in. We got to introduce the calming corner that we created here at the Generation Mindful into their classroom. And these kids, 7 and 8-year-olds, were so all about it and learning to put names to their feelings and learning that their behaviors follow their emotion. You could have heard a pin drop. And then there was a lot of laughing and giggling, and we did charades, feeling charades, and some other games. But kids are so excited to learn about their mind and how it works, their body, why they can't control it sometimes, and to have permission to not be shamed, that to be human is okay. And so, when this teacher, she's already moved so far away from first looking to behavior, and now she's just all about emotion. And she started doing a check-in, and this is something I really encourage all families and classrooms to do. If behavior is one of your focus, if altering your child's behavior is your focus, I want you to pause, step back, and shift to emotion. Make it your focus to focus on emotion. And what's so magic is everything else that we want follows. I will say, I had someone review the Time and Toolkit just this week. She's a Montessori teacher, and she embraced it in her home with her 2 and her 3-year-old. And she said, Suzanne, the first week was hell. She said, there was so much emotion coming up left, right, and center. She's like, I almost gave up. And she said, I'm so glad I held on, because I realized I had unconsciously been not giving my kids permission to feel. And when they got the memo through this toolkit and the tools that I set up, and we made a safe space to feel, boy, did they go there, and they used it. And she said after 1 week, everything started to regulate. They started to go from this to this and normalize. And so what happens was, there used to be all these peaks. She went, woo, real high, and then it leveled off. And now the kids are feeling safe to feel, and they don't have to be, so emotive. Anyway, I just thought that might encourage some people out there who feel like, whoa, what's going on with my little guy? It could be that you think that you are giving them permission to feel, but kids are so sensitive, and it's not what you say sometimes, but your body language. They're making up stories if they feel safe or not. And, if we're like, we're not mad, they're like, they're not buying it. If we're saying we're not mad and they're like, oh, you look mad, they're going to go with the brain, part of their brain that says that's not safe. Memo, mom's angry. So anyway, I hope that gets a giggle out there and helps encourage people to stay with it. When you start to allow emotion, you're going to get emotion. You really are.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting that, you know, it's this emotional release, and that what's really interesting is that children, they don't, especially little children, they don't connect so much with our words, but they connect with our being, our way of being, our emotions, and the vibrations that we're giving off. And so that's speaking to what you're saying there. And I also hear you saying that it's important. A good place to start is beyond teaching about emotions and to label emotions, it's saying that emotions are okay. And that means as an adult that we have to become comfortable embracing the full spectrum of emotions in life, because we are really comfortable with the happy, you know, the more positive emotions, but then there are the other side of emotions. And to be human is to really embrace and feel the full spectrum of emotion, and that's okay. And so I think that as adults, we have to start embracing that ourselves, so then we can allow our children to embrace that as well.
Profound. And what I hear you saying, and I absolutely agree, is that, you know, social emotional regulation starts in the body. And many of us were not raised in a way that tuned us and clued us into the inner experiences we were having. And it's very hard to have high social emotional skills or high emotional intelligence if you don't have self-awareness. And it's very hard to have self-awareness if you're not in your body. And for many of us, childhood was so painful, we had to get out of the body. We did everything we could to not be present to the inner experiences that were going on. Or we were super sensitive, and that was not safe because the world around us was like, you're a whiner, you're not strong. And they're sending us messages that gave us mixed messages about our own sensitivity. So some of us are just on a journey to turn those skill sets back on. And I think parenthood is the super highway to self-awareness. And boy, are we turning some new knobs on. And so, yeah, that's what's happening. And so I always invite parents into intuition. And don't tell me you're not intuitive, because if you're a human being, you are built to be an antenna. That's all you are, right? You are a sensory machine, and you are having inner experiences all the time. If you think you're not intuitive, you've probably been trained out of knowing yourself as intuitive. And it's so cool, because very simply, through your senses, you can get in touch with yourself as an intuitive being. And so when I teach classes, I always start with an exercise, 2 minutes, where we just practice tuning in. It looks a lot like yoga or mindfulness or meditation, but all it is to get back in our body so that we can be present to the brilliance that we already are. Because every listener out there has intuition, and it is their best parenting resource. It truly is. But some of us have forgotten how to even access it. And some of us can access it, but we don't have permission to listen to it. So I would like to invite you into both listening and following. You are an intuitive being, and do not let anybody tell you otherwise.
That is wonderful. That is really, really powerful. Thank you for sharing that. And our time, unfortunately, I think is coming to a close. And before we go, I would love for you to have the opportunity to talk to our audience about a gift that you're offering.
Yeah, so what we have for you guys today is a sheet. It's a printable coloring sheet on calming strategies. And we designed this for children ages 3 to 9, but you're welcome to use it with any age that you like. And it's a printable, and it's so sweet. All you do is you print it up and you fold it in half and fold it another way, and you've created a little booklet with the 4 sets of sheets. You put them together, staple, and now you've got it bound, you know, a bound booklet. And on the front, it invites your child to make it their own. They're going to put their name on it, put their picture on it, and then color. And when you do that, I would invite you to just play and practice those strategies. And I'm just so excited that I had the opportunity to be with your community today. So I hope they enjoy that little gift.
Oh, absolutely. I think they will. That sounds very wonderful and so helpful, actually. And thank you for being here today and sharing all of this knowledge with us. I appreciate your commitment and your passion. And all of this has been very, very enlightening.
Thank you, Devin. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.